Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Russia says its troops have pushed into Pokrovsk, a key transport hub in eastern Ukraine. After heavy fighting near the railway station, Kyiv insists its forces are still holding the front lines despite Russian gains. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres voices deep concern over continued violations of the Gaza ceasefire. Speaking in Doha, he urged all sides to respect the first phase of the peace agreement and halt the fighting immediately. President Donald Trump has endorsed Andrew Cuomo for New York City mayor, urging voters to reject left-wing front-runner Zohran Mamdani. Cuomo, running as an independent, said Trump's message was less than endorsement than an opposition to Mamdani. Typhoon Kalmaegi slams into central Philippines, killing at least 2 people and forcing tens of thousands to evacuate torrential rains. Powerful winds and storm surges are lashing coastal communities as rescue operations intensify. Chinese President Xi Jinping meets Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin in Beijing, calling for greater mutual investment and stronger cooperation. Xi says Beijing will advance ties with Moscow despite turbulent global conditions. Tanzania has warned citizens against sharing photos or videos that could cause panic as internet services resume after 6-day shutdown amid deadly election protests. President Samia Suluhu Hassan has acknowledged loss of life and urged calm. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington will seek flexibility for its troops in South Korea to counter regional threats while maintaining focus on deterrence against North Korea. He spoke during the visit that included a DMZ tour. Kim Jong-nam, North Korea's former ceremonial head of state and veteran diplomat who served under 3 generations of the Kim family, has died at the age of 97. State media says leader Kim Jong Un personally paid his respects to the longtime statesman. Now we start with Russia. Russia's defense ministry reports that its air defense systems have intercepted and destroyed 85 Ukrainian drones overnight. According to the statement, the drones were taken down between 11:30 p.m. on November 3rd to 7 a.m. on November 4th, Moscow time. The defense ministry has said that 40 drones were shot down over the Voronezh region, 20 over Nizhny Novgorod, 10 over Belgorod, 6 over Kursk, 4 over Lipetsk, and 2 over Volgograd, another 2 over Bashkortostan, and the 1 over the Saratov region. The ministry did not provide details on any damage or casualties so far. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Georgy Toloraya. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much, Professor Georgy Toloraya, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, looking at this, what's your analysis?
Hello, yeah.
Thank you. Professor, looking at this, what's your analysis on who is leading this battle between Ukraine and Russia? And do you think that the news that has come in today about Ukraine opening new arms export offices in Europe, does it affect the balance of military power in the region?
Well, I cannot hear you right, but I would say that actually today is a national holiday in Russia, the Day of People's Unity. And predictably, Ukrainians would like to spoil the celebrations. So far they send just drones, and this is quite habitual. Every night, every day, about 100 or more would enter Russian airspace. Most of them are shot down, fortunately. Some are not. For example, one drone hit the oil chemical factory in Sterlitamark. There's not much damage, but some damage has been registered. And some of them try to attack Moscow, including central Moscow, the capital. Luckily we have a good air defense, so but we understand that the people, instead of celebrating, they have to watch the skies and fight these drones. At the same time, in the meantime, Russia is, I think, finished its encirclement of Ukrainian forces in Kupiansk area, in Donetsk, Donbass. And this is another testimony to the progress of Russian troops, although it is rather slow and painful. But anyway, the Russian troops, they have the initiative in the warfare. So the more Ukrainians will procrastinate with going to find a diplomatic solution, the more they're bound to lose. And I myself believe that only diplomatic solution can be a solution, and that Europe should stop supporting Ukraine by military supplies and money to enable Ukrainians to agree to this inevitable end to the war.
Right. And Dr. Georgy Toleraya, as you are in Moscow, how safe do you feel as we see a lot of missiles target Moscow as well?
Well, you know, every night you go to bed, you don't know whether you wake up or not, because the drone can come from anywhere. And in fact, one drone was down to just a couple of kilometers from my house where I live, and somebody died in the incident, well, a couple of months ago, and well, it goes on.
Well, thank you for sharing that personal experience with us on NewsX World, and please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. The United States federal government shutdown has entered its 5th week, edging closer to becoming the longest in American history. The current closure is on track to surpass the 35-day record set between December 2018 and January 2019. House Speaker Mike Johnson has once again placed responsibility on Democrats in Congress, asserting that the shutdown will only end when those same Democrats make a deliberate choice to open it. The Republican leader has accused the opposition of obstructing efforts to reach a funding agreement, intensifying the partisan standoff in Washington. Let's listen in.
So we're now entering the 5th week of this Democrat shutdown, and it's for one reason. Democrats made a deliberate choice to keep the government closed. The shutdown will only end when those same Democrats make a deliberate choice to open it. The entire country is calling and waiting on just 5 more Senate Democrats to come to their senses and do the right thing. We are pleading with them to do so. This is not a game. The solution is sitting right in front of them. Pass the clean CR, end this madness, and open the government.
Johnson has also weighed in on the upcoming New York mayoral race, calling Democratic frontrunner Zohran Mamdani a Marxist and communist. He has claimed that Mamdani's rise terrifies the establishment's old guard Democrats in Washington, signaling a broader Republican effort to link local political contests with national ideological divides. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Georgy Toleraya. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much, Professor Georgy, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how is a prolonged federal government shutdown affecting public trust in both major U.S. political parties? And how do you think this shutdown will influence voter sentiment ahead of the upcoming national and local elections?
Well, I lived in U.S. for several years, and I was always amazed when almost every end of the year this shutdown would happen. And I think that shows just the contempt to the government, to the functions that the government performs, and it undermines the public trust into the political system. I was always very much amazed and surprised by these incidents, but now this is something outrageous when the civil servants have to earn their living by selling hot dogs because they paid no salary, when the people just don't get their food. I think this is outrageous. This is some kind of the absurdity in all of this, and something's wrong with the system itself. When the Congress, because of fighting internal fight in the Congress, the political functions of the most powerful state on earth even be performed. There's something wrong with the whole system, with the whole democratic structure of the US, I think.
Building on that, Professor, what do you think is wrong, and what do you think they should do to make sure that this, as you said, this is very often, as we see US government shutdown happening very often, so that this does not happen very often, and people suffering and people who are on these coupons or going or in urge of becoming in famine conditions in US, millions of people are not affected by such government's initiatives. Professor, could you hear me? Professor, let me move on to my next question here. Professor, what are the broader political implications of what we heard from Speaker Mike Johnson linking local elections to national ideological differences? We seem to have some technical connection loss with the professor. I would like to thank Professor Georgi Toleraya for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. To Middle East, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is on his first visit to India, becoming the 5th Israeli minister to travel to the country this year. Gideon's visit focuses on the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which was initially proposed in September of 2023 at the G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi. The IMEC aims to develop a clean hydrogen pipeline, an electricity link, a high-speed undersea digital cable, and to integrate existing infrastructure, including ports. Gideon Sa'ar, in a meeting with Indian External Minister, discussed about their fight against terrorism, including the need for a zero-tolerance approach towards the menace from the world's community and ways to ramp up cooperation in trade, infrastructure, and regional connectivity through projects such as the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. Sa'ar has described the radical terror as the threat to both sides and reiterated Israel's condemnation of the terror attack in Pahalgam back in April this year. Let's listen into what Israeli minister has said.
Our goal is to build a long-term strategic partnership between Israel and India. Your Excellency, radical terror is a mutual threat to Israel and India. We strongly condemn the horrific terror attack in Pahalgam. In the Middle East, Israel faces a unique phenomenon which I call terror states. The radical terror states of Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen have established themselves over the past decades. Uprooting them is necessary for the security and stability of our region.
Meanwhile, Jai Shankar has noted that India and Israel have a strategic partnership with a real meaning and said the two sides have stood together in testing times and created a relationship with high degree of trust and reliability. Let's listen into what Indian minister has said.
Our two nations face a particular challenge from terrorism. It is essential that we work towards ensuring a global approach of zero tolerance towards terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. We have naturally been following developments in your region with very close attention. We welcome the return of the hostages and the remains of those who unfortunately lost their lives. India supports the Gaza peace plan and hopes that it paves the way for a durable and lasting solution.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Shruti, now looking at Israel and India's relations, what does Israel have to offer India? As we know, India is a bigger country with more population, more resources, more history, and it has much more to offer. So what does Israel have?
Well, Israel is very key to India's IMEC plans, as you have discussed earlier in your reports. India as a nation plan to go through UAE, from our Mumbai port towards UAE, Saudi Arabia, and from Israel, then into Greece, and from Greece to rest of the Eastern Europe. So it's a longer journey in this, where Israel is key because we're using their ports, Haifa and such. But beyond that, India and Israel are two nations that face Islamic terrorism head on. They're both victims of Islamic terrorism, religious terrorism as such. And this is something which they experienced on October 7th and India experienced in Pahalgam. So there is a sympathy factor as well as global voice for nations that are not on either side of the conversation and are just suffering due to radical ideologies being supported by certain groups. So this is the second part of the conversation that is there. India, of course, is a superpower that Gideon Sar himself has stated, or at least is on its way to becoming one. It is the largest democracy and it is the most powerful economy in the world as of now, thanks to the lovely figures that we've been seeing. So everybody wants a piece of the pie, everybody wants in on the game. What Israel has to give us on the other side is support on things that we need to ensure peace throughout India when we are negotiating with nations that have hardline Islamic groups. So when we have Israel's backing, we don't stand alone in the conversation regarding anti-terrorism. The second part is that Israel has very strong lobbying in USA. So if we are good friends with Israel, India has access to that particular lobby as well via Israel. So that's the second part. And the third part is Israel is really, really good with technology specifically. So defense tech included. Although there were, during Pahalgam, there were reports that some Israeli companies were hired to have an attack, a cyber attack on Indian companies and government websites, which was neatly foiled. So there is that particular element as well, that if we are on good terms with Israel, then there is a chance that the government of Israel would ensure that such attacks, which can be bought from any particular nation, because it's a private company that would be hacking such things. So that particular element is no longer working towards an anti-India program as such. So in the larger scale of things, it may seem that Israel is just one tiny nation, but for our interpersonal relationship, right from IMEC to anti-terrorism, Israel is a partner that India looks forward to having for bigger conversations with the world.
And building on that, as you have also touched, but what challenges might India face in balancing its deepening ties with Israel alongside its relationship with Arab nations such as UAE, Saudi Arabia?
Well, that's a very valid point, Asuma, that you have brought up.
Thank you.
Israel is unable to kind of have good relationships with its neighbors, which in the Arab world, most of these nations do not even recognize Israel as a country, independent nation, and they have their own radical groups trying to overthrow the Jews out from that region and control the narrative of that particular place. So, on a whole, Israel has a larger number of enemies in its near neighbors, and it might seem that any friendship with Israel would make India exact enemies with people who oppose the idea of Israel or even its existence. But fortunately for us, we have good relations with both Qatar as well as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is actively working with India to ensure that there is a moderate Islam that is being propagated throughout the world on its own and in India as well. And Saudi Arabia is also part of the IMEC deal, so is UAE. So these two nations, which are the pillars of the Arab world, stand with India, and they do not mind cooperating with India as well as Israel for the IMEC deal, because they know this is where the progress of the world as well as the trade of the world is going to flow through. So this is where the money is, and hence they are ready to work with India while partnering with Israel on the IMEC deal. So although it looks bad because Israel has a large number of people opposing it, large number of nations condemning its actions in Gaza, but it has its own place in the world, and India is trying to find the middle ground, whereas we do not support one way or the other genocide of either the Jews or these Arabs in Gaza. We're trying to find the middle peace ground and ensure that progress happens everywhere, while radical ideology of any kind is suppressed and controlled.
Thank you for sharing that. And Shruti, lastly, bringing China into this conversation, how do you think China will look at this India and Israel relations becoming deeper? And how does this IMEC initiative reflect broader geopolitical competition with China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, the IMEC is a faster route, I believe, and it, of course, is not tethered in the debt loan trap, which is the home ground for China and its BRI initiatives. China tends to exploit the nations that it kinds of finds itself in partnership with in BRI. The prime example of it being the CPEC in Pakistan itself, and BRI on its own has found itself at a block because of the internal politics of Pakistan and their interpersonal relations with China not being that good anymore, because Pakistan has gone and made very deep friends with China's ideological enemy as well as economic enemy, that is USA. So there is a kind of stagnation in relationships between the partners of BRI. So India has been working towards the IMEC as well as other routes for trade that does not restrict itself precisely on the existence of either China or Pakistan or its enemies. India as a whole wants to be part of the global conversation on trade and manufacturing, and its government and other agencies are working towards it. We have Indian diaspora in various regions, right from South America to America, as well as your Arab world and Africa. So we've been making deals across the world to ensure that trade that benefits all our partners, not just India, but anybody, any nation that is partnering with India would find itself on the path of progress. And that is something which makes India's IMEC and other initiatives different than what China and its BRI initiative is. So China might be looking to find its way out of the debt traps that it has laid and now is bringing its own economic downfall, while India is just looking for good, decent partnerships and a continuation of the trade relationship that it has built over the years.
Thank you very much for that thorough explanation and sharing that insight. As always, great learning from you, Shruti Das Gupta. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. As per reports, North Korea's leader, Kim Jong Un, is willing to meet U.S. President Donald Trump. This comes after Trump made comments during his 5-day Asia tour that he was willing to meet Kim Jong Un while departing his Asia tour. Trump has also said that he would return to the region to meet the North Korean supreme leader. Both leaders previously met back in 2018 in Singapore, and Trump has praised their relationship, saying that they get along very well. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Georgi Toleraya. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Professor, what could a renewed meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong Un mean for U.S.-North Korea relations? And do you think could U.S. push North Korea to tangible progress on denuclearization?
Well, I've been watching North Korean-U.S. relations for almost 5 decades now. I've served in North Korea and been there many times. Last time was last August. I knew, by the way, well, Kim Yong-nam, former foreign minister who died today, so condolences to his family and friends. And this story about Kim Jong-un meeting Trump is not a new one. Even before Donald Trump came to power again, he reminded of his contacts with Kim Jong-un, and he said he would like to meet and to discuss things, to continue dialogue. Let me remind that, however, that Kim Jong-un was not happy with the last meetings he had with Donald Trump, because he suggested a very good deal in his opinion. He suggested to close down the nuclear center in Yongbyon in exchange for the lifting of just a number of sanctions, not all of them, but a number of most harmful sanctions for the humanitarian situation in the country. But Donald Trump flat refused, pressed by his former assistant John Bolton and Michael Pompeo. It was a huge setback, and after that, Kim Jong-un lost his faith in diplomacy, especially with dealings with the United States or their leaders. So he was very much disappointed and offended, in fact. However, since Donald Trump came to power, he several times reminded that he would like to meet Kim Jong-un. And these talks have already been quite active before his coming to Asia. Donald Trump gave some signals that he would like to meet, that he may stay in South Korea and travel to the North Korea or to the border, to the demarcation line between the two countries to meet Kim Jong-un. However, he received no response because Kim Jong-un and in general, the North Korean government, they see very little reason for talking with the Americans and Donald Trump. Although Kim Jong-un has specifically mentioned that he remembers his meetings with Donald Trump, and personally he is quite fond of him, but that doesn't mean that it can be translated into better relations between the countries. Kim Jong-un separated these two issues. And also his sister said that the condition for talking with the Americans would be recognition of North Korean nuclear status. He's not going to discuss denuclearization in any form again. It's already in the DPRK constitution, and North Koreans made it quite clear that they're not going to discuss denuclearization at all. Looks like the US is considering this option, although before the denuclearization and the removing this threat to global non-proliferation was the alpha and omega of their policy towards North Korea. And this is exactly the factor that has prevented US normalizing relations with North Korea for more than 30 years. After 1994, then they reached tentative agreement on the deal. But recently, Donald Trump is giving some signals that he understands that North Korea is not going to get away from its nuclear weapons. Just before his visit to Asia, he said that North Korea is a kind of nuclear power, and he mentioned that they have nuclear status, so that gives room for a meeting. That gives rooms for the dialogue. Although the problem is for Kim Jong-un that he is not going to give any concessions because he is in a much stronger position now. He now has his nuclear deterrent. He's got his economy developing better than before. He got the very good alliance with Russia, which supports him, and there's lots of cooperation going on. He improved his relation with China, and China is also helping North Korea a lot. He ignores South Korea, and he said he doesn't need any contact with South Korea. So US has something to offer to him, and so far we don't see what US can offer to North Korea. As far as I know, there has not been any just preparation for what would be US position in Washington.
Yes.
And North Koreans just cannot expect much from this meeting. So the problem is not the meeting itself, but what will be the contents.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Georgi Tolaraya for joining us and staying with us, also sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. The Chinese and Dutch government is at loggerheads over the Nexperia issue. In recent developments, China has accused the Netherlands of not showing a constructive attitude or taking concrete actions to resolve the dispute surrounding the Dutch government's seizure of the chip maker Nexperia. Earlier on September 30th, the Dutch government took control of Nexperia, which is owned by Chinese parent company Wingtech, citing national security concerns and worries about potential technology transfers to China. The Dutch government is also removed the Chinese CEO. Responding to that, China's Commerce Ministry has called the Dutch action improper interference in internal corporate affairs and a violation of the Chinese company's legitimate rights. However, the diplomatic reach-out were made between both governments to resolve this issue. The spokesperson for Dutch Economic Affairs Ministry have issued a statement saying that talks were still underway between both the governments. The standoff between has led to a major chip shortage, threatening to halt European automotive assembly lines, and has highlighted global concerns over semiconductor supply chain stability and geopolitical tensions. Now we move on to our next news. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has issued a statement on the earthquake in Afghanistan. The statement has informed that China is closely monitoring the earthquake situation in Afghanistan. The ministry has also stated that China is ready to provide assistance according to Afghanistan's needs. The Foreign Ministry has expressed its condolences to the victims. Earlier, a 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck near the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif, killing 20 people and injuring hundreds. The Chinese government has maintained continued engagement with the Taliban government and has been pushing for closer ties with Kabul. China also provided assistance during the earthquake earlier this year that has killed more than 2,200 people in Afghanistan. Let's listen into what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said.
中方也在密切关注阿富汗的地震灾情。我们对遇难者表示深切哀悼，向遇难者家属和受伤人员表示诚挚慰问。我们相信，在阿富汗政府的领导下，阿富汗人民一定能够战胜灾害，重建家园。那么，中方也愿意根据阿富汗的需要提供帮助。
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.